Dr. Dana Lillistol. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
Thank you so much for coming down. Welcome to the Blue to Green podcast.
Well, thanks for including me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I took a couple of notes, just kind of where to start. And the first thing I think that would be the most beneficial is to start with a little bit of a background on us, to who you are and where you are and what we're doing here.
Okay.
What we're talking about.
Well, I'm a trained family nurse practitioner, but I'm retired from that, and I have relinquished my registered nurse and my family nurse practitioner so that I can stand in the space of cannabis.
Okay.
I have a PhD in clinical nursing research because I'm a nerd and I love to learn. And I'm passionate about elders.
Okay.
And it's always been a passion of mine. I started my nursing career in a nursing home.
Okay.
And now because I'm a holistic doctor, I reside in medical cannabis for the last 7 years, and I couldn't be happier. Because plant medicine is power to the people. And unfortunately, our elders, if they didn't ever use the plant in their teenage years, they don't know how to use it now. And it's not the same.
Today's cannabis is significantly different than the 60s and 70s. I want to ask a question real quick. You stated that you're no longer doing the RN thing and standing in the medicinal cannabis space.
Correct.
So is this for legal purposes and licensing? And because of the Schedule I
Yes.
narcotic aspect of that, cannabis is still considered?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm pretty much just over the American Medical Association and handing out pharmaceuticals. I've done that for 30 years, and it had its place and space in my life. But there's more to health and wellness than just synthetic medications. And I see a role for them, most definitely. But we need to have the freedom to exercise our rights and try other things that might be less harmful or have less side effects, shall we say?
What kind of started you down the holistic path, or have you always been that way?
No. So I did missionary work overseas. I was very careful, but I contracted quite a few parasites in the Philippines.
Okay.
When I came home, my stool testing was negative, but I was fully loaded. Unfortunately, the stool medium that we put our stool in, the liquid, it can kill quite a bit of the parasites.
Okay.
And so it made me have to go outside of my traditional medical training. So I sought out naturopathic physicians and chiropractors and started going to their continuing medical education conferences, of which time I decided to do a lot of tests on me that were not of the standard American Medical Association. And I uncovered like 3 parasites and 1 very bad gut bug.
Okay, and regular tests were not catching this?
No, not at all. And by this time, I'm so lethargic, I can't do my long-distance running. And so I start doing...
I think it should be added, too, as well, that you're in fantastic shape. You had said that you were in your 60s,
Yeah,
and you're in fantastic shape,
thank you.
which would lead down the path of a holistic lifestyle.
Right.
So I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize
you're
for
great.
that.
So, you know, I got into gut immunology. That's my PhD, gastrointestinal immunology, clinical nursing research, because my tummy was a mess.
Okay.
And a lot of our tummies are bad. And if they're bad, that's your second brain. Our brains go bad, okay? We're more set up for dementia if there's an imbalance in the microbiome in the gut. So I naturally gravitated to plant medicine. I used herbs. I used non-psychoactive mushrooms in my practice, like reishi mushrooms, to help boost the immune system. So I have used all these products on myself and seen the benefit. And now that I don't have the credentialing, I'm now experimenting with cannabis, and I'm elated. Because I have an anxiety disorder.
Okay.
I never would ever acknowledge that until I turned 60. And I'm like, I literally need this plant just to calm my whole central nervous system down and to help me sleep because I have a very hyperactive brain. And so...
I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that.
I'm like a hyper thing. And I'm getting better as I age. But the anxiety can go from my brain and hit my gut. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I know a lot about the gut, and so I'm all about making the transition into wellness as easy as possible. And like I said, my passion is elders.
What led you down the path of using cannabis yourself? Is it something that you discovered later on in your life, or have you been using it for a while?
Very good question. So I was using Ambien to sleep because I couldn't sleep.
Okay.
And I was losing my short-term memory, forgetting things in meetings, and my business partner said, "You have to get off that medication." I said, "Yes, I do." And by this time, we're closing the practice. And one of my patients wanted to have a medical marijuana dispensary, and I said, "Well, hey, let's do it." She says, "Will you work for me?" I go, "I don't know anything about cannabis, but yeah, sure, I'm game." And so that's kind of how I got into cannabis. But I'm like, I can't have the side effect of this medication. So I started using cannabis for sleep, specifically Rick Simpson oil. I would take a little grain of rice, put it inside my cheek, and I finally slept. And that's our greatest anti-aging tool is sleep. If we don't allow the brain cells to discard their toxic waste and it starts building up, we start having memory issues. And it can escalate into dementia. So it's imperative that we're sleeping. And we have so many electronic devices and towers and some of us are hypersensitive.
Yeah.
I'm a hypersensitive person to energy. And I would work with my patients as well who were very sick to like sometimes bring in an electrical engineer to just fuse the electrical energy in walls because they were so sensitive to that. And so I look at the whole picture of the whole person, and I've always individually put protocols in place for people, and Big Pharma has it one size fits all, and that's not who we are as a people.
They're profit-driven.
Yes, they are profit-driven.
They're not health-driven.
No, they're not. And like I just did a presentation in Prescott at assisted living, hospice, home health, and I was reviewing all the literature for chronic pain and end-of-life transition, and all the synthetic meds that I analyzed in the literature, research literature that are synthetically made from the cannabis molecules, they don't show consistency in delivery over time. The side effects are not okay.
The synthetically derived ones, not from the cannabis planet, but like
like Marinol.
Thank you, Epidiol or whatever.
Yeah, for the appetite, you know, because there's muscle wasting and they don't have an appetite and they're so nauseated. So I mean that's one. So then what I did is I said, now I'm going to look at all the research on just straight cannabis for the symptoms of
that was
end
my
of
belly.
Life.
I apologize.
Yeah. So it would be. What about anxiety? That goes with end of life. And for the caregivers, for the family, and for the person actively dying. What about nausea? What about sleeplessness? What about weight loss? So I reviewed the literature just looking at cannabis, and it's quite stellar. We need more. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of anecdotal. There's some, double-blind, placebo-controlled, which is ideal, but we just haven't had the money.
Well, research is severely limited because of the scheduling of it. I want to ask a couple questions real quick. You're diving 100% in, which is what I love. I wanted to talk about the fact that because you said you're now out of the licensing space and all that, you're able to explore. So you said you're a nurse for 30 years.
Correct.
In that 30-year time period, did you get any information on cannabis in any way, shape, or form? Was there any training? Was there any CLEs? Was there any information other than drugs are bad?
No information at all. In fact, I was trained by the internal medicine doctor I worked with to do addiction medicine.
Okay.
I medically detoxed heroin addicts, crystal meth, cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, and I managed their diabetes or their hypertension, whatever. But the scoop is I saw marijuana as a gateway drug. And when I left the hospital because it went bankrupt, I then finished my medical practice and went into cannabis. I said, you know what? You have a PhD. Put on your big girl panties and you do the research. And when I did it, I was appalled. I'm like, they lied to us. This is so wrong. This is a plant. And, we have pharmaceutical meds made from plants.
Sure.
Like digoxin is a perfect example for the heart. But the scoop is it's synthetically driven.
Right.
And the body has an innate ability to understand what's synthetic and what's in the natural form. And when it sees that it's synthetic, it doesn't have that lock and key.
Okay.
Versus the natural aspect, the body goes, hey, come on in and play. I know who you are. And so it has less side effects and it has greater efficacy in the human body. And so there was no training in cannabis, absolutely none. And they can't. Now, I can speak from a nursing perspective. Nursing programs don't get Medicare dollars, which are federal funding.
Right.
Colleges of medicine do, so they can't deviate.
Right.
Okay? Nurses are known, and nurse practitioners are known to be far more open and embracive of more alternative therapies because we're really in tune with our patients. It's kind of like I say, if you're sick and I'm caring for you, you're the lead goose. You turn, I turn. You turn, I turn. And it determines what's the next step in your recovery, your therapy, your wellness program, your journey. And it has to be tailored to you.
Yeah. We're all different.
We're all different. And then so the cannabis space is overwhelming because there's so many molecules. There's so much that we don't know that's being found out right now. It's like the wild, wild west.
It is. And the one thing I want to add color to that is too, and I'm not going to go down this path, but one of the things that's kind of stifling it, and I want to discuss with you a little bit is big cannabis is sometimes getting in the way. Big cannabis is getting in the way of itself because they're profit driven. And I got into medicinal cannabis for medicinal qualities and medicinal properties because I didn't want to suck down opioids all the time for my herniated disc and sciatica and radiculopathy. Thank you. Yeah. And so I switched over and found it, and it's like, no, I want good quality stuff, but I don't want to derail from there. I want to continue down your path of this research where you discovered that, hey, they lied to us.
They lied to us.
Yeah.
And then I went, well, let me get the history.
Okay.
And it's like, it's related to two people. It's William Randolph Hearst, who had millions of acres of trees that made pulp for his tabloid newspaper. And it's DuPont in New York, who just got a patent for nylons. Hemp was coming in, and they knew hemp could make nylons, and they knew that hemp made better paper. And so in an effort to secure their economic interests, those two gentlemen convinced a brand new politician who was highly insecure by the name of Harry J. Anglinger to do a political campaign, which was racist in form in the early 1930s during the Depression. And the gist of the advertisement was white men of color are taking your jobs.
And your women.
And they're raping, pillaging, and killing your women. Only people who are evil and demonic smoke the devil's weed. And so it really worked. It was a racial slur, but it was from a financial motive. And the U.S. public knew what marijuana was, knew what cannabis was,
right,
but they didn't know the word marijuana. See, cannabis was part of the pharmacopoeia in America. And so they knew cannabis, but they didn't know the slang word marijuana.
Okay.
So it worked.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And then in 1943, they took cannabis out of the pharmacopoeia because it really worked.
I'm not one of these people, with my background. I don't necessarily say like, oh, that law is racist or this or that. But the foundations of the laws against cannabis in America are 100% based on race. It's 100% to keep black people down, and the history shows that that's everything that you said is very, very true. And again, I'm a conservative, and I always and it's at the same time it's like, yeah, but we have to acknowledge the actual facts that this is true.
Right.
So yeah, it's just very sad that a natural holistic drug has been suppressed because of profit,
right,
and money.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So you're going down this and you're discovering the fact that we've been lied to.
We've been lied to. I'm like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And it's like this is going back thousands of years. China, like India, it's everywhere, even Japan. I mean, we find it in tombs from emperors in Egypt, mm-hmm. leftovers of cannabis, and even some cannabis in those tombs. So it's a plant that has connected humanity from the beginning of time. It was part of our oral tradition from our nomadic travels when life was so difficult and men were away at sea for 2 years, away from their loved ones, their kids, their wives. And it was a way to elevate the experience of a very difficult life and bring levity and connection. And so is it any wonder it went everywhere across the
Right.
globe as we had all these fleets of ships, circumventing the globe. And we've known from every culture of its medical benefits.
Yeah.
And it took an MD that was British trained in India to come back to England to even treat Queen Victoria and her
Okay.
menstrual cramps. And he had done extensive research in, animals, rodents. But then he started doing tinctures and trying it in humans, and he was like, wow, this is amazing. So it's just a process of evolution for us as a species, utilizing what's given to us from the earth.
One of the things that I try to explain to people, and again, my background, I'm a former police officer, so I have tons of friends that are law enforcement, and they always do the typical, oh, you're just going to go smoke weed, man. And I'm like, you know what? I said, it's very funny that you say that. I said, but there is I've recognized in my life that, one, I have ADHD, and I was diagnosed as it when I was 35, and then also the back pain. And when I started using medical cannabis for my back pain, I've told the story before. I had a really, really connective moment mentally when I really, really, really started to see the benefits. And then from that moment on, when I wasn't in such intense pain that I was just using for the pain, but I was able to use other parts of it, it connects me to myself. It's the dumbest, this is the most woo-woo thing I've ever said on my podcast before. But one of the things is it actually makes me feel like I'm connected to my emotions and I'm connected to my body. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's like, and then also having ADHD, I'm like, oh shit, I can focus? Why are we giving Adderall when I could use the components from cannabis? And again, the terms I used where I started with that is that I tell my friends, I said, it's funny that, you joke around with the ha-ha stone and all that, but there's a very big difference between being medicated and being stoned.
There is.
There's a huge difference. One is a quality of life, and the other one is using the drug to escape or whatever the case may be.
Right.
11 o'clock at night, when I'm home and the whole family's asleep and I'm playing video games, I'm going to be more on the stoned side.
Yes.
Because I'm at home and safe. But through my daily life, when I'm out there, out and about, there's a difference between being medicated and maybe having 5 milligrams of THC in you for inflammation and all that good stuff and not being stoned.
Right.
That's just my personal take on that.
Oh, I love it. And here's the thing. Life is distracting. We have so many balls in the air. We have a computer in our hands or our back pocket. We have loved ones. We have jobs. We're 24/7 almost.
Yep.
And is it any wonder, especially I'm hyper too, that we get disconnected from ourselves and from our loved ones? And I totally agree. It's the same way for me. It makes me finally be calm and be at home.
Yep.
And to really do introspective work.
Very much so.
And continued healing, because I'm all about that.
Yep.
So it's really been a blessing, if I could use that word, because I don't want the side effects of Ambien. I had a patient in a dispensary tell me a terrible story. And he goes, you have no idea what happened in my family. I go, what happened? He goes, my brother-in-law got up at 3 a.m. He's on Ambien. He can't sleep. He gets up, showers, shaves, puts his 3-piece suit on, gets in his car. He's sleepwalking. He drives head on into a lady, kills her instantly. He doesn't know he survives. He has a lot of money. He's a man of means, so he can settle out of court. But that's tragic.
Very.
And the pharmaceutical company knows that can occur. And I had already stopped Ambien by the time I heard that story, but I'm just like, there's serious side effects to some of these synthetic meds, and we don't have randomized clinical trials for 20 or 40 years being on that medication.
Right. What's the long-term effects of this stuff?
We don't have that.
We don't have that at all.
And there seems to be a lack of transparency and a level of arrogance that it doesn't really matter. And I can't accept that as a clinician and as a researcher, and I can't, because I want people better, not worse.
I have a very special needs son. You met him. The doctors that I take my son to, that my wife and I take our son to, are more than happy to prescribe whatever drug that I want. Risperidone. These are the standard protocols for an autistic child. My son doesn't have anything else besides ADHD and is severely autistic, so they want to or would, if we accepted it, prescribe him Risperidone and Adderall and lithium, and there's a couple of other ones. And so I've been fighting here in this state to get autism added as a qualifying condition to allow for cannabis use. And the issue that I've been dealing with that for 6 years. We'll talk about that more later. But one of the issues that I always constantly run into is on the political side. Unfortunately, the staunch conservatives, and I'm conservative, the staunch conservatives are like, you just want to get your kid high so that they'll just be you can just leave them alone and they won't bother you. And I'm sitting here going, the drugs that those doctors want to prescribe my son would turn him into a zombie where I would never have to worry about him ever again. And I could live my life, but that's not what I want. What I want to do is find him truly inside of himself and unlock himself. And that's why I want to even just try cannabis.
Right.
Not to say that it will cure anything or solve any issues, but just the right to try.
Right.
That's all that I want. And it's disgusting that these doctors will prescribe these medications. And again, how long does it take to get the cocktail right, if you ever do? And how screwed up hormonally and chemically and imbalanced are these people that are on these mixed bags of cocktails? And I'm not saying that people don't need it, and I'm not saying not to use it. I'm just simply stating there's another way.
Well, I applaud you as a father to stand in your space like that. There's another family that did that. I met an autistic 17-year-old, and I took care of him till he became 23.
Okay.
And his family said, we've had enough. We're not doing the meds. So we got him, realizing that he shouldn't be on cannabis at 17, but we could medicate him with non-psychoactive molecules of the cannabinoids and decrease the agitation, decrease the anxiety, help him be he can be directed and help him sleep. Now that he's 23, he's taking cannabis, but there was a transformation in that child. He would come into the dispensary and make a scene.
Yeah.
And I go by Dr. Dana, and he, I'm just going to pretend to be him. He'd go, hi, Dr. Dana, it's really good to see you. And I would go and give him a hug, and everyone would turn around and look, and I'd go, let's just say his name's Josh. How you doing, Josh? I am so good. It's so fun to be here. Yeah. And his family said, we have a brand new young man in front of us.
Yep.
We're all sleeping now. I don't have to worry about him wandering.
Yep.
And it was a game changer, but they were a family of means, and that's sometimes can be an issue.
Well, and especially with cannabis not being covered by insurance, it's very, very costly.
Yes.
I mean, it's all out of pocket. That's all I'll say.
It is.
So,
and that's an issue for our seniors because they're so conditioned to a copay. And then they're like, well, this is kind of costing a lot of money.
So let's talk about that. So and one of the things is that like the problem is that you guests come on and talk about it and talk about cannabis and all that, and always the missing component is the research and the science. And again, how do we change people's minds? How do we get the general public on board? How do we get law enforcement on board? How do we get all the different aspects on board? It's through science and research and data.
Right.
And the problem is that and I know that the anecdotal stories that people tell are real.
Yes, they are.
I've experienced it myself. And one of the reasons why I started this entire endeavor a while ago was because when I got out of law enforcement and I got into the cannabis world and saw the healing, I started actually seeing like, oh, they're not just smoking weed just to smoke weed. Yes, there are, totally. But many of them had the ailments that they were attempting to self-medicate. Correct. Now, maybe they're not self-medicating in the best way. Maybe it's not the correct, whatever the case may be. But I commend them for not just jumping on pharmaceuticals and actually trying something. And I would not have thought this way 8 years ago.
That's wonderful. That you changed. And
it's just seeing the transformation though, but hearing the information from someone who's credible and like gives the explanation as to like, this is why, it is actually real. Somebody who's credentialed such as yourself that can, speak to these things and be like, no, there is actual real science to this.
Yes, absolutely. I think the ripple effect and the grassroots is the power that we have as a community.
Yes.
That's why I keep telling patients, please be transparent with your primary care provider. Yes, I'm a trained clinician. No, I will never take you off any of your pharmaceuticals. That's between you and your doctor. But there are certain medications we need to be very aware of in light of putting them in the door with cannabis, because your doctor and you are working to create the best environment in your body, and we don't want to short circuit those medications. So we'll have that conversation around the medications, and our elders have polypharmacy. So we really have to spend time looking at that polypharmacy, because like blood thinners need to be 2 hours away from any kind of cannabis.
Okay.
Okay, because you're going to need less blood thinner. So the doctor's going to have to watch your bleeding times while you're putting cannabis in the door until you realize what your cocktail is with cannabis to manage the pain or the memory or the anxiety or whatever the issue. And then they can dose that blood thinner appropriately when you get that base of how you're doing your cannabis. But the scoop is you have to have a clinician that's willing to work with you. And the more that doctor hears from patient to patient to patient and the difference, they start getting this curiosity and they look into it. And you would be amazed at how many more patients are saying to me, you'll never guess this. My doctor just said, why don't you consider cannabis? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because I want to, and I love that you're giving me the green light.
Yeah. I went because of I go to a pain doctor as well for my back stuff, and I had that exact same experience. I was open from the beginning, and I go to one of the largest clinics in the state of Arizona with the most doctors, so it's like the most corporate.
Right.
And when I was, again, being that open and upfront, and the pain doctors were like, good. And that actually surprised me. He says, the only thing, he says, we can't, he says, now that you disclosed that, he says, we're not allowed to prescribe you opioids. He says, we can give you other things if you need it. I go, I'm good. Like, that's what I mean. He goes, good.
You're good.
Yeah. He's like, that's what we want people to do. He goes, and I'm like, and it was just the last person on the planet that I would have expected because of the big pharma stigma and all that. It was very refreshing.
Well, if we get it to Schedule 3, you can go into, colleges of medicine.
Sure.
Right now it is in some colleges where you can get a certification or an AA degree in cannabis business or cultivation, which is exciting.
Absolutely.
Really.
Well, I want to make sure we stay on one of the things that you're saying is that I'm so grateful that you're saying it. A lot of people in the cannabis space will often, they have the mindset that, oh, you can't drive drunk on it, because it doesn't impair you, and it's not going to mess with any medications. But it's very, very crucial to actually understand that there could potentially be issues.
That's correct.
You need to be, like you said, you need to have full disclosure with your medical doctor. You need to have full disclosure on your usage, and there are things that needs to be managed because of that.
That's correct.
That's very refreshing to hear because most people don't talk like that.
Right. And at Life is Chill, we have a new product. It's a liposomal nanotechnology liquid that goes in a beverage or into a sauce. And it's only 2 milligrams a pump, but because it's liposomal, it's wrapped in a chemical called phosphatidylcholine that your body and my body make. So when we take it in, the body goes, well, hi, welcome, good to see you. And it gets absorbed really rapidly into the bloodstream, and it's bypassing the gut, and which is a huge issue because some of us have bad guts.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
And my 92-year-old mother about 10 weeks ago passed a kidney stone, and I gave her a pump in her coconut water. It was 2 milligrams.
Okay.
And then I kept her out of the hospital. She passed a kidney stone. She got a pump in the morning and a pump at happy hour. So the stuff is amazing. And it's rapid acting, precision dosing. And it's another way that we could work with a pain doctor to help someone come off of their opioids if the pain doctor was willing to have that. Right. And there's very few.
I will say, and I'll say openly, that Ortho Arizona and their pain clinics, I can speak openly that they advertise. They even have their own CBD brand now.
Oh, that's great.
I walked into the thing. What is this? You guys are in the CBD business now?
Good.
But okay, so let's discuss that. So you work for Life is Chill.
Yes, I do.
And which is they make the little chill pill cannabis-based products here in Arizona.
Correct.
Are they in other states?
No.
Or just here? We're just here? Okay, cool.
Just here.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That makes me even happier.
I know. Yeah. So we're passionate about elders. And we have gel capsules that are whole spectrum liquid combinations of THC and other molecules of the cannabis plant. And they come in 5, 10, 25 milligrams, and 100. And elders are used to pills.
Oh, very valid
They're
point.
super easy to swallow. They look like vitamin E. And because I have insomnia with my hyperactive brain, I went to Bali, Indonesia last July, and I can't sleep without the nighttime capsules.
Okay.
And it's death there if you
Right.
get caught with cannabis. So I just poured the nighttime pills into a vitamin E jar, and I went through dogs, customs, and immigration. I came home alive. Just don't go to Russia.
I don't know how that's going to play out on YouTube. So, hypothetically speaking, of course.
Hypothetically.
So,
Yeah.
but the bullshit to me is that, like, again, when you use the medication exactly as medication, it shouldn't be an issue. But unfortunately, as we know, don't go to Russia.
Don't go to Russia.
Ugh.
Yeah. So we have gel capsules, and then we have the liquid.
And to be honest, I am actually like this. I did have a conversation of like sponsorship, but so we haven't had that conversation yet. But I have, in fact, used Life is Chill products, and it's very, very good. And again, I've heard you speak, and I've heard you talk about that, and I want to talk about the protocols and stuff like that regarding different things that I want to use the word carefully, guided people through in their lives with different ailments, particularly the elder.
Right.
And why the elder is being completely left out of the cannabis conversation right now, when they kind of started it.
They kind of started it, but it's turned into recreational.
Okay.
And they're very uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, back from like the hippie days, they started it.
They feel uncomfortable the minute they walk in.
Okay.
First off, some of them are ashamed because of their religious training or whatever from authorities. And then they're uncomfortable with 22-year-olds saying, hey, man, how can I get you high? Okay.
That's a problem.
And a lot of the times those bud tenders haven't been given enough education. And when I say that, there's a lack of communication between those generations, and they mumble. Some of these bud tenders are mumbling, and elders find that disrespectful. And elders can be somewhat judgmental.
Sure.
They are really good at that, and they can just write it off and just leave. And we need to have a different approach, and they need to feel welcome.
Sure.
And so I try and take them into a dispensary that's very elder-friendly, and you're not rushed, and you can ask 1,000 questions, and nothing's stupid. And they come out of there going, oh my gosh, this is so much fun, and I feel comfortable in here. And the young people answered my questions, and they were so attentive, and I felt heard and I felt seen. And now I'm excited to go home and try this. And now I know how to find this place so I can drive here myself. So it's a process.
Yeah.
And I really, truly believe that if we want to increase the profits of our dispensaries in the state of Arizona, the secret is the elder community that has been eliminated from the conversation. And they don't know how to age well if they didn't use the plant when they were teenagers.
Right.
And so they're anxious. They're having memory issues. It's hard to pick up their great-grandbaby because it hurts with their back. Or they can't sleep. Or they just don't have any appetite because they're so depressed. And so I can talk about how do you deal with that and not be high? How can we give you function and quality back if you don't want to be out of control? And they're like, I can do that? I go, you can do that really easy. And that's when I talk about something called the alphabet soup of cannabis. You know, they're big words, but we abbreviate them. Like cannabidiol is CBD, which isn't psychoactive or intoxicating, is really the appropriate phrase. But it's amazing for memory, for inflammation, for pain, for anxiety. It's a vasodilator for the vascular bed. It's probably going to lower your blood pressure, so you got to watch your blood pressure.
See, more good info to know.
Yeah, you got to know that. And, you know, when they find out that they don't hurt as much, or their knee pain is less, or the swelling in the joint isn't as bad, or like after that pickleball match, their knee is a little bit better because they're taking it routinely. That's a game changer.
Amen.
And that's something that they have to do on their own. And then the other piece of the pie, after they see that, is, am I willing to pay for my own health care? Am I willing to pay out of my own pocket for my wellness program, which is cannabis? And I think at first it's difficult, especially if you have a limited income.
Absolutely.
But if you're in a community of individuals, let's just say you're really into pickleball or golf, and all your buddies or your girlfriends are using it, you're like, wow, Shirley's getting amazing benefit. Maybe I need to try it. You know, we rub off on one another.
Absolutely.
And so that's what community is all about. And our community is very cohesive.
The elderly community is.
And the cannabis
Cannabis
community.
has got some fractures in it, but
yeah.
but there is a side that is very, very focused on education, and it needs to shine through a lot more. And and that's the biggest thing is I don't mean to sound judgmental in any way, shape, or form. I'm a little bit older, and there are some times when I walk into a dispensary and I'm like, I'm not impressed with what I see.
Right.
And I actually, it's like, yeah, it is a little bit distracting, and I could completely understand if you take somebody who's even, 40 years older than I am.
Right.
That's just set in their ways, and it's not a comfortable space, and it's not navigable or anything like that.
That's why I recommend to meet all the bud tenders and find out which ones you can rely on, that are most knowledgeable, and then don't even go unless you know that person's working, because have 3 bud tenders you can rotate through. So my elders have that level of comfort, and they know they're going to get a certain amount of education that will inform them further for their health and their wellness.
Is there any sort of programs that you've seen that are like first-time elder at dispensaries? Like, come here, let us know it's your first time, and then we'll kind of create a different experience for you. Has there been anything like that?
Nothing.
So nobody's really catering to that in any way, shape, or form.
The closest I would say would be Weedworks with Rob and Randy Sobel.
Okay.
So they're out there in the elderly space, making that connection for elders inside a dispensary.
Okay.
They're setting up a table. They're having them come over, sit down, go over the education very slowly, letting them ask 1,000 questions, never hurrying them. And so they're a very unique couple that are bringing something that is desperately needed in the state of Arizona. And there's so many elders, there's more of us that could show up and help out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's pretty regional here in Arizona as well. I mean, you have your very specific, Sun City West is elderly, for a reason. When in your dealings with the elderly community, what have been the most common reasons why they have hesitated or not used? If you could think of just some of just the most common things.
They had a very bad edible experience. If they didn't, their friend did.
Okay.
And it scared them. Their upbringing.
Okay.
And their family. Like, I have 3 brothers. 2 of my brothers are adamantly against cannabis. My mother would not be alive had I not stepped in 10 years ago to introduce it. And so she just keeps it quiet and zips her lips because it's her quality. So sometimes there could be an issue within a family context. And then there could be an issue within the social context. Like, maybe I'm like a fervent Catholic, and I'm part of a Bible study group, but I have debilitating anxiety and peripheral vascular disease. And so I have numbness in my feet. And the only thing that's giving me relief and quality is cannabis. Now, do I proclaim that in church? No. But am I uncomfortable? Yes, because there are fractions of people that I rub shoulders with that would probably judge me. And I can't go there.
And it's totally acceptable for the priest to drink his wine, and for the soccer moms to get together and swill their wine, and the dudes to get together and drink their beer and all that. But, you use cannabis, we're going to stigmatize that.
Right.
And unfortunately, that is still a very real thing.
Yeah, and that's why I'm out there talking like crazy. And not only talking to the elders, but the caregivers and the family members, because we're all in this together.
Yeah. There's American culture, though, is not focused on the elders, though.
No.
We're very, go your separate ways, come together for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and that's about it. So I mean, just in my personal dealings in life, that's what I've always noticed. We're not like other cultures that are generational and stick in households and stay together and stuff like that.
Right.
So they're just completely left out on their own.
Yeah, they feel like they're discarded. They don't really matter. And is that any wonder? Arizona is a huge conglomerate for 55 plus communities because we need one another. We need that connection. We need to play. We need to have fun. We need to feel like we matter.
Absolutely.
And those communities are vibrant and they're all over. But some of them will not let someone like myself in because cannabis isn't allowed.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm just checking. And there's a readiness that's happening slowly. And you can't push the envelope. You just meet people where they're at and love them where they're at and say, well, you know what? Maybe in a year I'll give you a call. Let's just see if there's a new interest.
I've heard that the best quote I've heard to me about discovering cannabis is that you don't know you need cannabis until you need cannabis.
Right.
And that sounds stupid, but it's like the moment that you find yourself like, this ain't working, I've got to find something else, is that when you turn to cannabis. And it's like, that's when you start to realize the medicinal powers of it. And, like, oh, there's something to this.
I had people come into the dispensary, like one lady who had multiple sclerosis. She goes, I'm off all of my medications. I go, how did you do that? She goes, I've been studying my body for years and implementing cannabis, and now I don't need anything. And I had another lady with fibromyalgia tell me that. So I'm just like, you are amazing. And thank you for being so inspirational. Be your own doctor. That's my platform.
There is a huge push, I would say, since COVID times,
yes,
to become your own doctor, to do the research. And I would 100% think that, or feel that the world has gone more towards the holistic lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And I'm 100% on board with that.
Right.
In fact, I'm getting a chicken coop here in a couple weeks. So,
nice. Well, no one has their doctor doesn't have the luxury of living in their body.
Right.
Who knows you the best but you?
And I would say even though we do know ourselves, we ignore ourselves.
Well, of course we do.
Pain doesn't matter. Oh, that's okay. It's just been a little persistent, whatever, for a little bit. Oh, it's cancer now. We're to the age where I think we've just gotten accustomed to feeling so shitty for such a long period of time that we don't really know what health and wellness is.
I would agree with you.
We've just running around all inflamed and angry.
Right. And doing too much and not having boundaries.
Yes. And through my journey in my life, as I've gotten older, I've placed those boundaries and I put my physical health as priority.
Yes.
And
same
that's,
here. It matters. Mm-hmm. So if someone's scared to put their toe in the water with cannabis, I would say find someone who knows something that you respect, that you can rely on, that can come alongside you and support you, because we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And there's no stupid question.
And there's not, especially when it comes to cannabis. And again, we don't even know all of the medicinal side of it.
That's correct.
So we can't even answer all of the questions yet. That's been the most frustrating part. And again, now that my mindset has changed into what cannabis could be, right, I just want to slap the living crap out of people and be like, it's just a plant.
It's just a
plant. It really, really is.
Yeah. But you could see the power of perception, the power of words, the power of advertising. And it's real.
Yeah. It's fear. It's stigmatizing. It's fear. I had notes I wanted to make sure I went over. I had a couple of questions for you. Yeah, no, I just, it's one of these things where, I have absolutely lost faith in the medical community because they don't know what they're talking about me personally. I don't believe in having just a pharmaceutical prescribed to me. I want to fix the problem. And now cannabis doesn't necessarily fix the problem, but it does certainly have a hell of a lot less side effects of it.
Right. Correct. Right.
And the one thing I always say that people just don't, they're like, that by ingestion alone, not smoking too much and getting in your car and doing something stupid, which I do not condone drinking and driving, but by ingestion alone, not a single human being has died from ingestion of cannabis.
Right.
Now, I am hearing that there are some people, particularly children, who have gotten high-dose edibles and have, in fact, had seizures. This is information that I'm actually hearing as of recently.
Right.
And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the gummies do resemble candy.
Yeah.
And parents of children need to lock up their gummies so that they're not accessible.
Sure.
And they really probably should lock it up before they even start using, in case they, they're so busy being recreational and whatever they're doing that they fail to put it away.
Sure.
So it's just an error in judgment.
But what about the mechanism of the cannabis in starting the seizure? What are your thoughts on that part?
Well, it's overstimulating.
Okay.
So it's going to the CB1 receptors in the brain and overstimulating.
Okay.
And they're poor little, they have a high metabolic rate, children. So they're going to process it so fast.
Okay.
And their brain just goes into like crazy mode.
Okay.
They have to discharge that at the receptor sites. So we have chemicals in the brain called neurotransmitters, and they go across a cleft called a synaptic cleft, and they communicate across the cleft. And that cleft would be like the 4th of July with fireworks going off nonstop in the brain, and the child just can't handle it. And so the brain has to shut the child down just to get rid of what's there on the receptors. We should never give a child THC.
Interesting.
Only
take.
CBD.
Okay.
Why? Because the brain hasn't fully developed.
Sure.
Okay? And we can do some serious damage to that still, viable, malleable brain. And so when I was in the psychiatric hospital and medically detoxing, I would have 15-year-old boys come in who had been using so much cannabis. They literally changed their brain chemistry to schizoaffective, and you can't change it back. And so it's serious. That's why it's imperative as parents we have the conversation with our children that when your brain is done developing, you can start using THC, but not until. And it's young men, they take longer for their brains to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Young women, their brains are faster. So, we don't have research there.
Right.
We need longitudinal research, but we don't have that.
So the one thing I want to address is that there's a lot of, cannabis can't harm you in a developing brain. Cannabis can harm you in this or that. I err on the side of caution. I err on the side of caution of like, hey, we don't specifically know yet because we don't have as you said, the longitudinal studies. We don't have the gold standard of practice.
We don't.
And it's just the sort of thing where we cannot push a narrative without the science. And I don't ever want to be one of those people that's like, oh, he thinks weed will solve everything.
No.
It needs, and also you mentioned the schizoaffective part. There's a very big there's two completely opposing sides to that 100%. There are sides that like that is absolute bullshit.
I know it.
And that's not possible and it can't happen. And then there's a side saying, no, I've in fact seen or dealt with or exactly
firsthand.
And I've had a county attorney on who had a suspect that never ingested THC before, smoked a joint and didn't realize that it had high THC, a distillate and all that good stuff in it, and then ended up murdering his mother. So, or not mother, but murdering a woman that he was related to or something like that.
Right.
And that was actually very recently. Oof. And he said that he remembers smoking the joint and then remembers going into psychosis, but doesn't remember anything else.
Okay.
And where I'm going with that is that there's clearly science that needs to be done.
Right. Especially in mental health.
Yes. Yes.
It's conflicting with bipolar, with depression.
Yes.
And for us to say that this is the end all and the magic bullet is not acceptable. That's where caution needs to be front and center, because we don't understand the brain on cannabis enough,
right?
Especially when the brain is off. And so we don't want to fuel it and make it worse. So we have to be respectful.
Absolutely. And again, like, we don't know what we don't know yet.
We don't know. Right.
That's why we need descheduled, or not, I would love descheduled, but rescheduled testing. And this is the really crappy part, is that there are people, researchers, clinicians, doctors, PhDs that want to do the research. But yes, it can be done right now because it is a Schedule 1, but the immense amount of hoops that they have to go through is ridiculous. It would be your full-time job just filling out the paperwork to get it done. Where if it was just rescheduled and you could go through the process the same way as anybody else for whatever,
Right.
it would be significantly streamlined.
Yes.
You could collect good data. You got a million weed smokers all over the place that would be more than happy to give data.
Right.
Like, we have the sample size.
We do. Yeah. I mean, it's funny you bring this up because I was just on a call because Life is Chill wants to do a pharmacokinetic study on our liposomal nanotechnology, and we want to prove that how it works in the body. So we're going down that road right now.
Nice.
Got to get an institutional review board,
Okay.
and then we're getting our scientists in line, and yeah, we want to prove scientifically with blood what it's doing. And then, subjective reporting.
Sure.
So we're starting down that ball game.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Very cool. So you mentioned Life is Chill a couple times.
Yeah.
Who are they?
Life is Chill.
We haven't really talked about them yet.
So it's a novel cannabis edible company that's only in Arizona. And it's scientifically based. It's connected to a scientific company. We own the land. We have our own laboratory that's state of the art. We do everything processed right there in Payson, Arizona.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was in Payson.
The company's been around for about 5 years. It was bought from another company, and now we're really in development of a lot of different new products. We're all about no sugar.
Oh, good.
We have huge issues with diabetes and obesity. We have no sugar. And so diabetics and people who have weight issues shouldn't be punished. If they need their medication, we have it for them.
Yep.
And so we are really different. And we want to not only, we have a brand in 50 dispensaries here in the state, but eventually we want to move to other states, because if your sister lives in Missouri and it's working when she came to visit you, she can't use it or get it there.
Right.
So, and the research is critical for us to show what our product can do.
How does a small company that's whatever state that's focused on patient health grow and maintain their focus on patient health in this cannabis space and not become big pharma, not become big canna, even though you were to become big canna? How do you keep that focus on the patient?
Well, personally, the people that I work with at Life is Chill are passionate about wellness and health. And those individuals are going to be true to who they are. And we're not money driven. We're patient driven.
That's good.
So our mission is patient care using an alternative plant and putting it in the hands of our elders who have served us and plowed the way. And so that's how we're positioning ourselves. And I don't foresee that this would become big cannabis. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The only way I see that is big pharma gets involved and makes all kinds of synthetic products, and then I would call that big canna.
Sure. Like, the problem is too is that, like, I'm unaware if it's happened yet, but big pharma could just come in and just save the day, and then instead of using the holistic plant, they turn to their factories and turn to their scientists and make it all out of Chinese synthetic chemicals. That's the fear. That's the very big fear.
I know.
Instead of us using milk of the poppy from poppy seeds, we
Right.
use synthetic fentanyl,
Right.
synthetic, hair or morphine and all that stuff.
I think there's a big movement, a grassroots movement, because the vast majority of Americans are barely able to function without cannabis. Life here is getting more difficult.
It is.
People are struggling financially. They're struggling emotionally because they lost loved ones with COVID and couldn't say goodbye.
Yep.
They've lost their resources with their home, or businesses went under, and they're trying to rebuild, and they could be my age. And so that's really stressful. And so how do I cope? How do I feel whole? How do I feel relaxed amidst the stress and the strain? And if it's not in their life, it rubs on them from their loved ones or their friends or their coworkers. So to be human is to feel that.
Right.
And if you feel like you don't have that in your life, then you're not in touch. Because we all are connected.
Absolutely.
Energetically, we're connected. Spiritually, we're connected. Now, some of us don't believe that,
Sure.
but it's a ripple effect.
You can look at any community of any living organisms in the world, and they live in a symbiotic harmony relationship in some way, shape, or form with each other. But there's a pack, there is a community. I don't care if it's wolves, chickens, or foxes, or bears. There's some sort of a pecking, there's some sort of a community together. And we wall ourselves up in, chemically derived synthetic houses with 6-foot block walls and don't talk to our neighbors.
Right.
And then as time goes on, we are more and more connected as ever with these things and are more and more lonely as anything. Exactly. It's you see the husband and wife that don't connect because they're sleeping on the same bed facing away from each other looking at TikTok reels or whatever.
Right.
We've become less and less connected. And the really neat thing I'll say is that, and like, I know this is kind of like all over the place, but like, it's the cool thing about cannabis is that I, at 40 plus years old, can go and smoke and relate to a 20-year-old and can relate to a 60-year-old and can actually connect across. And that is a very real thing.
It is.
And it's just like, it doesn't matter if you have something in common or not, or whether you're left or you're right or you're blue or you're green or red or yellow. It doesn't matter. It is a very connective plant. How does, let's go the elder route. How can an elder incorporate cannabis into their lives to be able to have a higher quality of life? I know how I do it, but I'm curious as to how we could push that narrative.
Right. So one way that they could function with anxiety is start taking a cannabinoid called CBG, non-intoxicating. I take it daily. It helps calm down my whole central nervous system. So if they're always functioning in a realm of fear and afraid, they could take that away just with CBG. They could do it in a tincture under their tongue with no sugar. They could put it with a gummy that has sugar, or they could take it with one of our daytime pills, 5 milligrams of like THC and CBG. So there's lots of ways. And I'm always about goodness of fit for that elder who's in front of me. And so we don't know what their body's going to like the best.
Right. Right.
And yes, of course, I sell a certain product line.
Sure.
But I'm all about the goodness of fit. And if my product line doesn't do that, then I'm most certainly going to support the product line that's working for them because it's medicinal. Mm-hmm. It's about getting it right for that patient. And so there's a cadre of people like me that really are there for them. And I mean, it's exciting. I went to one 55-plus community, had 400 people show up.
Awesome.
And now I'm bringing in individuals that can talk about their chronic pain or their peripheral neuropathy and their journey with cannabis because I'm one voice. But it's something else to meet someone who had a problem like they did, and then they experimented in that journey and how it panned out.
Yeah.
And they're like, if he can do that, I can do that. Why not? So, I mean, we need one another.
Yeah, absolutely. That fear thing is a very real thing in the elder community.
Yeah.
We're living in such a world that they're just not used to. Even myself being not as old as an elder, well, I might be an elder to some, but yeah, it's a big scary world right now. Technologically wise, just going to do anything. I mean, you go to a restaurant and they want you to scan something and get your menu.
Right.
So like everything is new and just different. And I can understand how that could be fearful or induce fear.
Right. I mean, if they have insomnia, they could take an indica, in any way, form that they want. And so I'll walk them through that. If they have a low appetite, I can tell them exactly what they could put into the equation. And it's always low and slow.
Yeah.
Patience is critical. And so I'll put a program in place of low and slow and then touch base with them in a week or so. But I always have an open door. Text me. Like, how's it going?
That's good. That's called patient care.
Yeah, it's like don't increase it until the 4th day. If you like the response, but you think you could use more, then increase it. But if the response was adequate, stay the course.
Right.
So, and it's going to be different for another person versus you. It has everything to do with your hydration, your metabolism, your stress level. How rested are you?
Yeah.
those components all have a play in how that product is assimilated and delivered to places in your body. And the uncanny thing about cannabis is it can find the area in the body of chaos and imbalance, and it goes there. That's the innate beauty of the body and the wisdom of the body.
One of the things that we should mention too, and I'm sure you'll have a significantly broader understanding of it, as you've already mentioned a couple parts, but the fact that as medicine evolves, we discover new things.
Yes.
And that the endocannabinoid system was not even known about until the 80s, late 80s.
Yeah, about that.
Yes, it's like, and if my memory serves me correct, the federal government funded a study to prove how harmful and detrimental cannabis was, and they accidentally discovered the endocannabinoid system.
That's correct.
And I'm only aware of, I've heard that there's been more discoveries, but I'm aware of the CB1 and the CB2 receptors.
Right.
I'll let you explain that in a minute. I just wanted to say that, here we are talking about like learning
Yes.
that the human body has perfect receptors for the same materials that are in the cannabis plant.
Right.
Cannabis, endocannabinoid, endo meaning inside the body, cannabinoid being the thing. And here we are learning the fact that like these are now things that we're discovering.
Okay, so in my health class in 7th grade, I was never taught about an endocannabinoid system. I wasn't even taught that I make 2 cannabis molecules in my brain called anandamide, the bliss molecule, or 2-AG, and that they give me that runner's high. They help with my body, my inflammation, my pain. I was never told that, and no doctor, no nurse, and no veterinarian is ever told that, because Big Pharma controls medical education. Okay, and they have an invested interest. Okay, and the plant was stigmatized.
Yep.
Okay, so that being said, there's a problem of access. There's a problem in being able to communicate it because of the stigma.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, you're one of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, let's have a conversation. And so, like, I forget exactly what you said that I'm answering.
I was just talking about the fact that, as medicine has evolved, we've discovered the fact that there is an endocannabinoid system, that there is CB1 and CB2 receptors.
Right. So then if we bring the cannabis from the outside into our body, it's an exogenous cannabinoid, okay? So it could come in a gummy, a tincture, flower. We can smoke it with a concentrate. We could do it in a drink. We can make brownies. We can have a blast, okay? But the scoop is our bodies are rigged with receptors. CB1, cannabinoid 1 receptors in the brain, cannabinoid 2 receptors in the immune cells, the organs, and connective tissue in the body. So there's certain strains that will hit different areas in the body, but it's not always the same in each person's body. And the endocannabinoid system has a lock and key system. So when the cannabis comes in, whether your brain made it or you brought it in externally, it will find a cell membrane and dock, kind of like Star Trek, how the ships would dock. And then the guys and girls in this ship could walk across the bridge into that ship. It's the same way in the body. It goes across the cell membrane and talks to the cell like, what do you need? Okay, let's get to work. And it does it on its own. It brings cellular stability to the body, internal balance. Who couldn't use that?
Who couldn't use that? I think I think we all could use a little internal balance.
Yeah. So it's a chemical system that is amazing that hasn't been given to our medical professionals.
Right.
So is there any wonder that they're not talking about it? And their education, like we said, is paid by the federal government. So we're making progress, and I remain encouraged. And more people are waking up to its benefits, and we're rubbing off on one another. Our community is growing.
I will say that, not to take away anything from anyone that is an RN or a paramedic or a PhD or anything like that.
Right.
I think that if we can start getting actual MDs, actual medical doctors, because there's just some, particularly with the elderly crowd, an inherent trust if somebody has that name of MD at the end of their name.
Right.
If we can just get some more of them speaking publicly publicly about either their usage,
Right.
which I know for a fact that there are certain medical doctors that will stand up there and talk all day long about certain drugs,
Yep.
but just can't give in to the stigma of allowing themselves to say publicly that they use cannabis
Right.
because of the stigma. If we could just get like a handful of badass
Right.
medical doctors that stand up and say, listen, we need to like approach this completely differently. And I use it and here's why.
Right.
I think that would just unlock a lot of doors.
Well, and I think maybe we need to create a cannabis medical conference just for that purpose, and lay public and MDs are there.
Yeah, 100%. And again, the nursing staff is with the patients. As you said earlier, they're going to know the patients. They're going to have such a deeper understanding of who the person is. Obviously, not in like an emergency room setting or anything like that, but in more of a longer term setting care and all that. And it's the nurses are going to be the one that are going to be more in tune to all that stuff and hearing the stories. My nurse, when I had my back surgery, I told her, I fully disclosed to her that I use cannabis. And then she goes, have your wife bring you some. And my wife brought me some while I was recovering.
Good. Yeah. I did that too for my mom. Yeah, totally.
And it's the nursing staff that's way more instead. And again, if we could just get the medical side.
Some of them are very tainted.
Are they?
So my mom, who's 92, I had to take her to the ER, and they're like, "You're not taking cannabis, are you?" With that tone. And my mom and I look at one another. My mom goes, "Oh, no." And then we go like, they don't know.
She's 92.
I know. And what's going on, though, is a lot of young people are showing up in emergency rooms with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and they're giving the plant a bad name.
Yes.
And so then there's a little bit of a self-righteous attitude in that environment, and they're like, oh, another one?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. And so it's giving them a bad taste. And it's a small subset, and unfortunately, it's rubbing off on our elders. And if they go to an ER, they're going to like, oh, I was just chastised by my nurse. I can't take that anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's going to cause
You see, so that's why I have to talk to the caregivers.
Yeah.
It's imperative because it's just like they're so sensitive and they want to be right. They want to be, they don't want to be judged.
Right.
And so every place that they have a contact with a medical professional, one of them can taint them and say, oh, I can't do this anymore.
And I think it would be fair to say that the older generation is significantly more trusting of medical doctors at face value.
Yes.
No matter what the medical doctor says, that's what I do. And again, right, wrong, or indifferent, just strictly the ways that they were raised. And that was the doctor knew all.
Well, we're different now.
Yes.
Okay, so I think there's more of an openness to being in charge of our own lives and being our own doctor and choosing who's going to have a voice in our life and who's going to be a part of our healthcare team.
Yeah.
And when we start waking up and taking responsibility for our health, things will really change.
Amen.
One person at a time.
I do know that the cannabis hyperemesis syndrome is a very real thing. And again, this is another one of these things where there are certain people who are like, oh, that's not a real thing. It's like, no, actually it is. There's identifiable cases in emergency rooms. And again, we just need to discuss the fact that these things occur. It's just like anything, you have sugar in food, you're going to have obese people. It's the greatest statement that I've repeated, and I wish to God I could remember who said it. I think it's the guy from MAPS that said, it's not the drug, it's the relationship to the drug.
Right.
If we can use it responsibly and with an intention and purpose,
right,
that's what's going to heal us. It's, and taking, along with the cannabis use, but also the change in lifestyle as well.
Right. Well, and we live in a hypocritical life. I mean, we can have Percocet. I can come to work with any kind of opioid, and I can go out and have a glass of wine at lunch, but I should never, ever consider cannabis. And that's kind of crazy to me.
It's one of these things where it's just going to take time and just repetition and just where intelligent individuals get up, such as yourself, and speak and say, like, do I look like a stoner to you? You know what I mean? Or do I look like someone who has passion for people and want people to live their best lives?
Right. Yeah. And the more narratives, the more discussion, the more sharing, the more power we have. And that's why I say, let's start an evolution in elder wellness. It's called Embrace Cannabis, baby.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
An evolution in elder wellness. Give them their power back.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. My mother is of that generation and her husband are of that generation who I love dearly. And it's like, yeah, let's put you back in control of your life so you can leave your house and go out and go for a walk.
Right. And unfortunately, we don't have just one medical cannabis-focused dispensary, where you could come in and there's meeting rooms and education, and we need something like that would be amazing in this state.
Just having knowledgeable people on staff.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just having maybe that's just throwing out a concept here, maybe a dispensary, a little room off to the side where we can just go and just have a small little chit chat and just make people feel more welcome.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because again, I want people to live their best lives.
Absolutely. And it's one baby step at a time.
And regarding the existential crisis of end of life,
right?
Have you ever seen or have you experienced people being able to accept it more with the use of cannabis?
Well, so cannabis in end of life helps with the chronic pain with the patient who's actively dying, their anxiety, their sleeplessness, and maybe they don't need to eat because they're leaving us, but it also helps the family members to be able to deal with their anxiety, to deal with the angst of losing a loved one that's so precious, and it can keep the loved one cognizant, aware, and speaking so there can be closure.
Yeah.
And COVID took that from us.
It did.
We desperately need that connection. And it's also there for the caregivers. Like I was talking to the hospice caregivers, like you're going through a lot of trauma. You're watching people lose precious things to them, loved ones. And it can affect some of us more deeply than others. And so I'm like, you could be taking CBG for your anxiety. You could be taking CBN at night for your sleep because you're so wrapped up in the last person who passed.
Sure.
And so I'm not only there for the elder, but I'm there for the caregiver because they need to know that they're important.
Yeah. Oh, and the job they're doing is very important.
And if they can experiment and see the benefit, oh my gosh, it's a win-win.
And that's just an aspect that I never thought about. A caregiver taking care of someone a long-term caregiver and that person passes. That's probably like losing a family member.
Right. And it's like, you don't have to be high. I can show you doing CBD, CBC, CBG. I know it's alphabet soup.
It is.
Okay?
It is.
Because they're big words and I'm just going to abbreviate.
Well, and what I'm going to do for this particular episode, we'll put all your contact information up and we'll put Life is Chill's contact information up. But then also I'll find some sort of a good link unless you know something specifically that gives a very good breakdown. A little clickable link that's like, all right, let's start from the beginning and what the endocannabinoid system is, and just a very, very simple, basic thing. Yeah. And one of the things that I want to say that is as a mid-40s man, when I walk into a dispensary, like just speaking of the frustration of the elders and all that good stuff, I don't want to pick up a strain of weed called Alaskan Thunderfuck.
That's correct.
Or, Pink Pussy or whatever the case may be. I don't. I wish and I hope that we could get to the point where we're like, hey, we know that these cannabinoids affect these parts of the body, and we know that this strain has those cannabinoids. So here's your one for headaches. Here's your one for inflammation. Right. I wish we could get to that point. On the recreational side of the house, you want to call it
anything.
Go call it whatever you want. Don't care. On the medical side of the house, though, I'd like it to be a little bit cleaner, and I wish we could get to that point. I don't know if we will. I don't know if we're past that point. Maybe there's, but I'm much more concerned about the medicinal benefits of it, particularly those who have ailments.
I would agree with you. I think the elders that I come across that are still smoking were smoking when they were teenagers.
Sure.
And they've been rec users for a long time, and they're stoners, and they're okay with those names.
Absolutely.
The elders I'm bringing in right now don't want to smoke.
Right.
They have a past history of cigarette abuse. They don't want to open that doorway. Maybe they have asthma. Now they're diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis or COPD. And so they're like, no, I just want to take the edge off, or I want whatever. So they're not going to be smoking.
Right.
So it's all about, again, goodness of fit and showing them the various delivery methods.
And I think a pill is respectable.
Yeah.
I'll go to my purse, get my little pill.
Right. And go about my business.
Go about my business.
Discreet.
Yep.
No one knows. There's no aroma. There's no hidden dyes. There's no sugar.
I got to get me some more of these pills. I've had the live resins ones from Life is Chill.
Oh, yeah, they're good.
Delicious.
For being creative.
Yeah, totally.
And focused.
Yes.
Really good for the ADHD brain.
Yes. And I have learned too, when we're talking about all these different ingestion methods, that they work differently. So for pain, I have discovered that edibles are the best and longest lasting for the pain.
Totally.
If I smoke, I forget about the pain. It's like the edible works on the pain and lowers the inflammation, where the smoking, makes you high.
Right.
Not so much high, but I've said it before about being medicated, but it just kind of makes you forget about the pain.
Right.
So
it changes the pain signals out of the brain. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure we covered everything.
Okay.
And also wanted to give you the floor. Is there anything you want to specifically bring up or talk about, or?
No, I think I talked about the things that I'm most passionate about.
Awesome.
Yes.
No, like I said, I always want to make sure that I cover all the bases. And the problem is that there's so much to cover.
There is.
We could talk for hours. We could go down the endocannabinoid system for hours. We could go. This is all about just kind of skimming the surface on, what Life is Chill is, who you are, what your background is, and all that. And there's just so much we don't know about cannabis.
Right. Well, and I was a professor at ASU. So
No, I did not know that.
Yes, I directed the Family Nurse Practitioner program in the Edson College of Nursing and Health Innovation. And so I love to teach, but I can't ever make another nurse to go into that environment, ever.
Really?
No. To me, it's very, very toxic.
Because of the pharma control?
A lot of things. A loss of a lot of good nurses.
Okay.
Because of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're overworked. The morale is really poor. The dynamic is not what it used to be.
I'll give you this tidbit of information. I was pre-nursing.
Okay.
And I was an EMT. And then when I got out of law enforcement, I went back to school and I was pre-nursing. And just kind of speaking on the culture of nursing.
Yes.
I'll be the bad guy on this one.
Good.
I contacted GCU because, there's the nursing. I was in the 2-year program. I was going to go into the 2-year program. I did not start it. I did my prereqs and co-reqs and was waiting, but I was on a timeline because of the GI Bill.
Right.
I was going to do the dual enrollment to get my BSNRN.
Right.
I contacted Canyon University. I'm like, hey, why can't I just go into your program? Like, why can't I just do the full program at your school? Like, that's not the way we do it. And if you apply to our school, you'll have to start at ground zero. And so,
what?
Oh, I've got the whole email chain still. So if I'm like, so wait a minute, I'm fully funded. So you're gonna get your money because of the GI Bill. I've already passed on my pre and co-reqs. My money is good enough for you to attach your college's name onto my 2-year program so that I can get the BSNRN, but it's not good enough to just go to the nursing program at your school. This didn't make any sense to me. So I'm going like, this doesn't make much sense to me. So, and I'm like, there's a 2 million nurse shortage in the country.
Oh, it's huge.
And so I started thinking to myself, and then I had another issue. So I said, all right, whatever, I'm not going to go with GCU. So just real quick, I'll make this real short. I'm sitting next to a young lady in my class who, again, we're doing all the prereqs and co-reqs for nursing. And this is when I'm 36 years old. So, and she was telling me that her boyfriend got admitted into the direct admission nursing program at ASU. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Straight out of high school.
Right.
So I was like, I don't think you're right. She's like, oh yeah, no, he's going to go straight from high school. He doesn't have to take the HESI A2s as long as his scores maintain whatever, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. So I literally left the parking lot went into the parking lot and I called them because I wanted to get my nursing degree and I didn't want to wait on a waiting list. I'm like, I've got everything ready to go. I call ASU up. I talk to an advisor right then and there. She explains to me, she says, oh yeah. She says it's for high school students that meet a certain criteria. Then they go directly into the nursing program where their first 2 years are their English, math, science, their prereqs. And then the last 2 years are their nursing programs. So they're coming out of college at 21, 22 years old as a BSNRN. That's fantastic. I don't have a problem with that. Please stop me along the way somewhere if I go astray. My wife she's not a nurse, but she does work in healthcare. She works in medical imaging.
Okay.
And she herself has said that the quality of nurses that have been coming out over the last several years, They can't handle anything.
No.
They're getting so burnt out that you're taking 22-year-old kids that have never handled trauma a day in their life,
Correct.
and now throwing them into emergency rooms,
Right.
critical care, ICUs,
Yep.
and their mistakes are being made, and it's just this. They're getting burned out.
Yes.
And the trauma and the death and all of the horrific things that nurses see over the
Yes.
course of their career. And it's like, and I was talking to this counselor. I said, so you'll take an 18-year-old kid,
Right.
but you won't take me who's knows how to cope with the trauma.
Right.
I've been there, done that, seen it, tried it. I've scooped dead bodies off the highway
right.
before. So this is a little rant on nursing in the state of, the state of nursing. I apologize for that.
No, I
didn't
love
mean
it.
to derail, but it's like, that is the sort of thing where, yeah, the mental health trauma of any mental health worker, the trauma and PTSD of any healthcare worker, that's what I meant to say,
Right.
should be priority. And I do believe that they're just as much of a first responder in many cases, such
yes.
as those out there, out on the actual highway and stuff. Cannabis can absolutely help with their mental health.
Absolutely.
That was a very long way of saying that.
That's fine. It's a problem.
It is. And in the again, I'm sure that you probably still have a passion for it and are just upset with what you're seeing.
Yes.
Yep.
Very, very much so. But I can empower one patient at a time
Yep.
to take their health care back with a natural substance. And that's bigger joy.
Absolutely. When I saw the frustrations that I was personally going through with getting into even the nursing program, that's when I switched degrees. But that's when I really started looking into the medical cannabis world. And I was like, I can actually be a healthcare worker. And I do believe at the medicinal side you are.
Yes.
And still help out people and still help out patients.
Right.
Just not go to nursing school.
Right.
So I wish I was getting paid the nursing school pay, but
Right.
traveling nurse pay.
Yeah. Oh, that's good pay.
Yeah.
Yes. Very nice.
So, well, Dr. Dana, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I appreciate your knowledge. Is there anything else you want to cover? Anything that we didn't cover?
No, I think we were pretty exhaustive.
And what I want to do is I want to put this out there.
Yes.
And I will attempt to target the older community.
Awesome.
And we'll get the message out there and get some feedback.
Right.
I said I'll get all your contact information.
Okay. Well, one thing I would lastly say, I'm going to start podcasting.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm going to be interviewing elders and their journey with cannabis.
That would be so cool.
Their self-discovery, how is their pain doing? Like, funny. I want antics and experiences and bad realities.
You know that there's going to be some hilarious ones of, Grandpa Joe and Grandma Joanne had their first edible experience.
Yeah. So it's going to be comical, but informative and fun.
Awesome.
So,
and again, when you get that contact information, we will put it all up there, and I sincerely appreciate your time on this.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for this
Thank you so
opportunity.
much. Awesome.